Hello humans, Master Dinnerflex here, bringing you the low quality content you deserve, and today I'll be going over Lair of Darkness. Now, this will be my third attempt at making this video, so I hope you enjoy because it's getting a little frustrating for me at this point. But I guess I'll just go into it, and I'm not going to speed through, but I do want to, not spend well over 2 hours trying to make a single deck profile, so let's get into it. Triple Arima. It's Lair of Darkness, but it's also a searcher or draw a card. It's pretty much a tributor, which is the most important factor about this card. And I see a lot of people cutting Diablos, which I actually agree with, because Diablos is one of the worst bricks in the deck. But the thing I don't agree with is they're cutting all the search targets for Arima, which I believe is absolutely incorrect. So a problem that happens with this deck is if you Extrav and you have Lair of Darkness, Arima, and there's a problem monster on the field you have to deal with, if you don't play a single search target for Arima, your hand is worthless. Because Arima, to draw cards, you have to be allowed to, but if you have played Extrav, you can still activate to search to tribute your opponent's monster effectively, but you have to have a search target, otherwise it's an illegal activation. So I don't even care what you play. You could play Skarm, you could play the Kaiju, you could play some random dark monster that doesn't do anything but has 2,000 defense. It doesn't matter. Just play a search target for him, because this interaction with Extravagance happens too often to ignore. So yeah, Triple Arima. Triple Lilith, the best card in the deck. I literally don't need to explain this card. Not even close. One Malice I do. So this is effectively the fourth true Lady of Lament. While you are playing 6 theoretical copies of Lilith with Tour Guide, the issue is Tour Guide is not a true Lady of Lament. It doesn't cycle traps into play when you summon her off Tour Guide. Tour Guide can also get hand trapped, whereas these 4 cannot. And ultimately, the thing about Malice is that if you look at this deck, every single card in this deck you have access to buy another card except Terraforming and Extravagance. Every other card in this deck, in theory, another card can get. And by that, I mean, Arima can search Skarm. Skarm can search any of the level 3 Fiends. And Skarm can search Tour Guide, which can search Sangan. And Sangan can search any of these 4 cards. And it's like, all these monsters are searchable through another card. And what this card has that Lilith doesn't have is this one is searchable by Sangan, which is actually very huge. Because of the fact that many of your games, like in the late game scenarios, you're going to get grinded out if you don't have a card like Malice. But not only that, but when you can Sangan search it off Tour Guide and effectively get it immediately rather than in the end phase, that's really, really important. Because leaving it on field is just so important as a Lady of Lament while Lair is up. Yeah, it sucks that this card is effectively unplayable without Lair of Darkness on field, but that doesn't change the aspect of this deck already. So I would still play this. It's also a very grindy format where a lot of trap decks are coming into play, and having a card that keeps your trap pool infinite is really, really good in these kinds of formats. So I am playing one Malice, searchable with Sangan, Tour Guide, Skarm. So it's searchable, more searchable than Lilith, but yeah. And it's a true Lady of Lament, of course. One Diablos. I know, I agree with cutting Diablos, but because I'm playing slightly more Tributors than other builds, like with the Malice and another card you'll see soon, I'm a little more confident in playing this guy. He's still just really insane. That hasn't changed. His protection effects are nuts, and then being able to remove a card and then remove a hand resource mid to late game is really devastating. And he pushes for so much damage, it's just kind of powerful. So I don't feel confident in cutting him yet, but like he is definitely the biggest brick in the deck. And the second biggest brick is Skarm. This card is very slow, but it literally searches like 4, 8, 9. It searches 9 monsters in the deck. Not only that, it's like a great discard fodder. And it's truly a part of the tour guide toolbox, but it's also searchable with Rima. So it's just like this deck toolbox is like the entirety of itself, and I really like that. And Skarm kind of rounds off that toolbox. Speaking of toolbox, triple tour guide, it can resource all your level 3 fiends, including itself, for like link plays, but it can also resource Sangan. And Sangan is really important for this deck because it allows you to play without Lair for a decent period amount of time. To give you an idea, when I was playtesting this deck, I grinded out Shadal's without using Lair of Darkness once. Literally, its effective tribute I never used, and I grinded Shadal's out of the game. But that was really, really important with Malice, which you could search with Sangan, and then being able to search hand traps over and over again with Sangan while you're also gathering traps is really important. This is one of the things that can keep you in the game if Lair is constantly being targeted. So yeah, one Sangan. And then this card is awesome. The Dark Hex Sealed Fusion. So I'll explain its effect soon, but originally I wanted to play Dragoon in this deck, like really, really bad. So I added the Dragoon package, 1 Red Eyes Fusion, 1, and then 2 of each of the normal, or 1 of each of the normal, and it was literally the worst thing ever. It's not even funny how bad those cards are. The fusion literally has to say win the duel for me to want to put those cards back in. And despite popular belief, Dragoon doesn't say that. This card is easily outed by several decks of the format, several traps of the format, and more importantly, even when I'm playing 3 back to the front, so I can revive Dragoon anytime I want to in that theoretical situation, it still wasn't good enough to play those bricks. I was just so sick of drawing them, so I just cut them entirely, but I didn't want to give up on playing Dragoon in this deck just because it's such a powerful card, and this deck does struggle for Omni Negates. So I tried this guy. Originally I was like soft cheating because I didn't realize he can substitute as any fusion material. That's his effect. But the others must be correct. That's fine. But that doesn't count in the deck. So you can't Red Eyes Fusion him out using like Red Eyes Fusion. You can't send him from the deck. You have to send him from hand to field to have him substitute as a fusion material. But anyways, I'm not playing the Red Eyes package, fusion package. So what this guy does is you can substitute him as any other fusion material, but the rest have to be correct. That's fine. So you might be thinking, well, if that's his only effect, that doesn't seem very good. But it isn't. This is a level 3, Dark. It's not a Fiend, it's a Rock, but it's searchable through Sangan, and you can send it with Cherubini because it's level 3. But its other effect is, for cost, you can tribute monsters on the field, including himself, and then special summon a fusion monster from your extra deck that would use those materials. So it tributes for cost. Okay, Lair of Darkness, obviously. And then it special summons a fusion while being a substitute material. To give you an idea, this is effectively the 4th copy of Super Poly in the deck. Because you tribute an opponent's monster, and then tribute this, and you can go into Starving Venom. Or, there's another card I'll show off soon. So it's effectively another Super Poly. But since searchable with Sangan, it's easier to get than Super Poly. And then, what's really cool about this is you can send it with Cherubini, which is easily accessible through Tour Guide. And then you can revive it with Back to the Front, and then fusion summon that way. But, well, special summon that way. It doesn't fusion summon. That's important to remember. This doesn't fusion summon, it just special summons. One final thing is, because it's a substitute material, this card is also Dark Magician. So if you have Diablos or Starving Venom Fusion Dragon on field, you can tribute him and that Fusion or Diablos and make Dragoon that way. So this card is awesome. This card is just crazy good. I love this card. It's another tributor, effectively. It's effectively one of these guys, which is another way to trigger Diablos. And it summoning a boss monster to trigger Diablos is pretty sick. I really enjoy that aspect about this card. It's pretty cool. And then finally, 3 Ash Blossoms. They're searchable through the Sangan, and when you're looping Sangan with like backs to the front and whatnot, you want a constant thing to search that's like always going to be useful, rather than like, I know a lot of people when they use the Sangan to like, they'll use like one Ash, one Ghost Ogre. They'll like use different hand traps, which is actually I kind of agree with that theory. But if I have Ash Blossom, I would actually rather search a toolbox card like Hex or Malice or even another tour guide than actually searching the other hand trap, because hand traps are still -1s for this deck, and this is very much a control deck that needs to keep the card advantage flowing. So like, I'd rather just have a hand trap that's like always the same than have like 3 random ones and they're not always good against the matchup. Spells, 3 extra, 3 Lair, 3 super poly. You can send this with Verte Anaconda, which is accessible through Tour Guide. So literally, the only 4 cards in the entire deck that are not accessible through another card are Extravagance and Terraforming. Only 4 cards. Every other card in this deck can be obtained through another card. And that's really cool. It's actually a really cool aspect about this deck that I like. So yeah, 3 super poly broken. But I'm going to be totally honest. I think if you don't have Lair of Darkness, this card's worthless. I'm not playing the Signet fusions. They're awful. I'm not playing Mud Dragon. That's awful. Like, the normal monster fusion, awful. Like, honestly, I literally have a fusion package just for when Lair of Darkness is up, because if Lair of Darkness isn't up, Super Poly is dead. Period. Like, it's a like anomaly when it's live when you don't have Lair of Darkness up. That's the honest truth. Like, if Lair of Darkness didn't turn them dark, obviously you wouldn't play Super Poly. Like, that's the honest truth. Like, this card is only playable with Lair of Darkness, and you need to respect that, rather than try to put like awful fusions that will come up once in a million years in your extra deck. Just don't do that. Just respect that Super Poly is only good when you have Lair of Darkness. And then Terraforming, it's more Lairs of Darkness. And then for the traps, I am back on this gravy train, which is a total mistake, I feel. But man, do I love drawing cards. So this card, draw 2 cards, skip your next 2 draw phases. If you're under the assumption that, oh, but it locks you out, stop caring about that. That's literally not a problem. So a lot of people, when they say, why are you playing Reckless Greed? You skip your next 2 draw phases. That's not what this card does. This card says draw 2 cards and skip your next 2 draw phases. That's what it literally does. But what it's actually accomplishing is it's saying you get your next 2 draw phases in advance. So if you're under the assumption, well, if you draw bad off Reckless Greed, then you're locked out of your draw phases. If you were locked out of if you had bad draws off Reckless Greed, those were going to be bad draws off your draw phases. That's the honest truth. Like, if you lost to Reckless Greed, you were actually going to lose to those draw phases anyways. Except Reckless Greed just speeds up that process. And then, if you cycle another Reckless Greed into play through your Ladies of Lament, or you just hard draw one, it ignores that. So honestly, when you're playing 3 Reckless Greed, 3 Lilith, 2 Trap Trick, you're always going to see Reckless Greed, and it's very easy to see multiples of them at the same time, so just don't care. Like, the Reckless Greed argument is a fake argument. Like, it literally, like, on thinking about it a little bit, Reckless Greed, if you don't want to play it, just don't play it. But, like, the argument that it skips your next 2 draw phases is irrelevant. Because what this card actually does is it's a +1 on activation. Next turn, it pays for itself. And then the turn after that, it's a -1. That's what this card does. That's all it does. So just keep that in mind. And when you cycle them, you don't skip 4 draw phases. You only skip the 2 draw phases of the last one activated. So if you activate 3, you don't skip 6 draw phases. You only skip the first 2. So yeah, triple Reckless Greed. Triple back to the front. This is kind of important with the Hex. Because it's just really powerful, and you want to recycle it, and you want to send it with Cherubini, and you want to do all this cool stuff. So yeah, triple active front. It also keeps you in the game longer, which is important in a more grindy format. Double Ice Dragon's Prison, double Dynamiscus, double Trap Trick. If I were to cut the Reckless Greeds, which I do not blame you at all for cutting them, they're literally just here because I like drawing cards and I'm a madman. You can replace this for 2 punishment and then a 3rd trap trick. I would still recommend playing 3 back to the front. I've always just been under the assumption that, like, if you hate drawing back to the front, it's because you're playing such a low monster count of non-impactful monsters that you're actually kind of not properly building this deck. Like, back to the front is so important for keeping you in the game. It's also a blocker. It lets you do so much. It also lets you dodge Ice Dragon's Prison, which is all huge, by the way. So yeah, double trap trick. But if you want to cut the Reckless Greeds, 2 punishment and a 3rd trap trick. It's just that simple. And then 1 Metaverse. It's an 8 copy of Lair when you have the Ladies of Lament up. Whew, man, I'm powering through this. So for the side deck, Triple Dimension Shifter. Now, this card's actually really cool in here because it's searchable through Arima. Now, you might be under the assumption that, well, it's true. The moment you have a card in your graveyard, this card is no longer an effect monster, which is true. However, if you're going second and you have Arima, Lair, you can activate Lair, normal summon Arima, tribute their monster, search Shifter, and then discard it, because you have not committed a single card to the graveyard yet. It doesn't come up much, but game 2 and 3, a lot of people like to take it slower against stun decks or control decks like Lair, just because they know that if they throw everything to it, they'll probably lose to the side deck. So that's something to keep in mind with Shifter. But it is very good because it doesn't hurt this deck too much because Malice can recycle Banish traps. Sure, the Skarm, the Diablos, and the Sangan are like really hard hit, but like outside of those 3 cards, nothing else, like the D Shifter really doesn't matter. And for the next one, 2 mana Dragon, last name. This card is awesome. To give you an idea of how awesome it is, I sided in against everything. I side these 2 cards in every single game, 2 and 3. Because they're obviously going to side in Cosmic Cyclone and any other back row removal. And the moment they do, like, let's say you're going second, activate Lair. Oh, they Cosmic it, special summon this, set Lair, activate it again. Accomplish nothing with that Cosmic Cyclone. Except actually making an OTK easier. So, this card is awesome. It's also a Dark Dragon, so when you draw it with Hex, you can make Dragoon. Well, that's pretty cool. This card is awesome. I cannot state how cool this is. The only downside is I don't want to play 3 of it, because it does depend on your opponent. But like against Zodiac, when you activate Lair, they're going to have to pop it. So you just summon mana, activate it again, and they feel awesome about that. 1 Kaiju because it's searchable. 1 Pank because it's at 1. Triple Judgment for when you're forced to go first. Triple Evenly Matched when you want to win the duel. And then 2 Storm Dusters for other like control matchups. It's pretty handy to have. It's also a mine out, which is important. Extra deck. So Link Spider just to turn a token into an effect monster. Beat Cop, it's there for emotional support. Board Blocker, really important. If they're burning through your lairs, you can make this, discard one, and get a lair back. Verte Anaconda, this is pretty common. We're playing Super Poly, so it's pretty easy to put in. Cross Sheep, I actually don't see anyone playing in Lair, and I'm very confused about that because, like, if you go Tour Guide, Scarm, and have Super Poly in hand with Lair, you search Lady of Lilith with Scarm, set the Super Poly, like in phase, whatnot, and then when they make a play, you just Super Poly them, discard the Lilith, special summon the Starving Venom, and then revive the Lilith. So now you have additional disruption. And man, do I do that a lot. And even when I don't do that, like, I'll, like, draw into the Tour Guide engine, and then I'll make this, and then Super Poly, like, some of my stuff, or, like, a mixture of mine and their stuff, and then revive a thing. Like, this card is really cool in here. It doesn't come up very often, but nor do any of these guys. So, like, I was actually kind of fine with putting him in here, and he's pretty awesome in here. And then Cherubini is probably one of the most important links in the extra deck, just because when you have a lot of Torment tokens on the field, but you don't have access to, like, anything anymore, you can turn the level 3s into this guy, and then, like, send to Lilith, send to Scarm, send to Sangan, send to Hex, and then revive it with Back to the Front, or in, like, Scarm's case, get a Search in the end phase. It's just really important, and I use it a lot, honestly. I use this guy a lot. He's probably my most made extra deck monster outside of maybe Verte Anaconda. Then for the fusions. Oh, this is fun. Triple Starving Venom. Obvious. Triple Triff. Let's go Pendulum 3 negates. This guy can use tokens, which is really important. And then 2 Arc Fiend's Manifestation. So, this guy is really important with specifically Hex. Because one of the problems I run into is that when you special summon with Hex, Starving Venom doesn't have an effect at all. Because it can't use this on Fusion Summon effect, because it wasn't Fusion Summoned. And its Regeki effect, it wasn't Fusion Summoned. So it's literally a 2800 normal monster. But with this, it can fuse with tokens, or special summon with tokens if you use Hex, which is really important. But its effect on field is that he summons Skull, and summon Skull to gain 500. So instead of being a 2800 normal, he's a 3000 normal. Yep, that's pretty much it. It actually came up so often I threw 2 of them in here, honestly. So, yeah. 2 Manifestation, 1 Dragostapelia, pretty good, and 1 Dragoon, like I mentioned earlier. But yeah, that's about it. Thank you all for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Like I said, like, if you want to cut the Reckless Greets, I do not blame you. It's not a card for everyone. It's a really awkward card to use for some people, but I just like it because I am insane and a lunatic. But yep, that's about it. Thank you all for watching, and remember, Master Dinnerflax will take your soul.